My name is Carsen Taite, and we're back with the Bold Strokes Books Bookathon. Thanks for joining us here today. So we lost an author in June. Her name was PJ Trebelhorn, and she had a book coming out that came out that month. And today Radclyffe has joined us to read an excerpt from that book. And so if the rest of us could just stop our video and we'll just give the screen to Rad and let her get us started.
Thanks, Carsen. I'm honored tonight to be able to read this work from PJ's latest book, which is Moving Forward. The first book PJ published with us was in 2010, which was From This Moment On. And I had met PJ and her wife a couple of years before that first book was published, when she was coming to a lot of our events. And I was really impressed with how dedicated and determined she was to write lesbian fiction. And she went on to publish 13 books with us. We were very fortunate that we were able to publish that many. And tonight I'm going to read from Moving Forward, which is her July release. And just to give you a little background, I'm going to read a quick excerpt from the blurb, and then go on to read one of the early scenes, which is one of the pivotal scenes in the book. So this is the blurb from Moving Forward. The last person Shelby Ryan expects to run into is Iris Calhoun, the sister of the man who killed Shelby's wife 4 years and 3,000 miles ago. When Iris becomes an administrator at Hopewell, the local nursing home where Shelby volunteers, avoiding Iris becomes impossible. Iris testified against her brother during the trial, believing he deserved a life behind bars, even if her family considers her a traitor. But after he was killed by a fellow inmate only months later, she struggled to forgive herself. Shelby and Iris know the best thing to do is stay away from each other. But as they come to know one another, an unexpected and undeniable feelings of attraction emerge. So what I'm going to read is the first meeting of the two main characters when they both arrive for Thanksgiving dinner with mutual acquaintances, unaware the other will be there. Shelby got out of her Grand Cherokee and smiled at the St. Bernard, who was waiting patiently in the passenger seat to be told she could get out. When Luna had been a puppy, she'd often jump onto Shelby's lap to get out the door before her. Knowing if she let that go on, it would result in nothing but pain as Luna grew to her adult weight of up to 150 pounds. Shelby had trained Luna to sit there as long as it took for Shelby to call her. Luna, come, Shelby said. Luna walked slowly across the seat, but as soon as her feet hit the ground, she took off to explore the front yard of the house she knew almost as well as her own. Shelby headed for the front door and called for her, waiting for Luna until Luna came to her side and looked up at her, tail wagging and tongue hanging out of her mouth. There was a car parked in the driveway Shelby didn't recognize, and she shook her head at the thought someone would drive a sedan in this kind of snow. They had a blizzard. Not our concern, right, girl? Luna barked softly and followed her inside the house. Shelby told her to sit until she could remove her jackets and boots and grab the towel Jane always left hanging by the door for her to wipe off Luna's massive paws. We're in the kitchen, Jane called as Shelby was hanging the towel back on the hook. Come on in. Apparently everyone was in the kitchen since the rest of the house seemed completely empty. So Shelby headed that way, Luna on her heels. She smiled as she accepted hugs from Jane and then Holly. But she felt the blood drain from her face when she saw the third woman who was there with them. You okay, Shelby? Holly asked, sounding concerned. You look like you've seen a ghost. I'm fine, Shelby managed, but she couldn't look away from Iris Burnside. Iris Calhoun, I'd like you to meet Shelby Ryan, Jane said, seeming oblivious to Shelby's discomfort. Shelby, this is Iris. She runs Hopewell now. Nice to meet you, Iris said as she held out a hand to Shelby. At least she appeared to be as thrown as Shelby to find herself face to face. Shelby accepted the hand automatically and silently chastised herself for doing it. She sure as hell didn't want to be civil to this woman who was bringing the past crashing back into her present. Yeah, was all Shelby said in response. She pulled her hand back and forced a smile as she turned to Jane. What do you need me to do? Entertain Iris for a bit? Jane asked. Holly and I will have everything ready in a few minutes. Shelby sighed and turned to walk to the living room, not really caring if Iris followed or not. She sat on the couch and turned the television on. Iris took the seat on the far end of the sofa and stared at the floor. "Why the hell are you here?" Shelby asked, keeping her voice low enough so they couldn't hear her in the kitchen. She'd never had a panic attack before, but she was worried she was about to. She was breathing heavier than normal and felt a bit lightheaded, and her heart was racing. Shelby thought she'd never lay eyes on this woman again. She'd hoped she wouldn't anyway. "If I'd known you were the Shelby Jane mentioned," Iris said, "I wouldn't have come." Iris spoke quietly too, but didn't raise her eyes from the floor. "They never mentioned your name to me," Shelby said. "But then again, I wouldn't have known you anyway, right? Calhoun? Did you get married?" "No," Iris said with a laugh that really held no humor. "Calhoun was my maternal grandmother's maiden name. I legally changed it before I moved here. I wasn't sure how much national coverage the trial got, but I didn't want to have to answer any questions about it. I figured it would be easier this way." "Why are you here in Oregon?" Shelby asked again. She glanced over her shoulder to make sure Jane and Holly were still in the kitchen. Iris finally looked at her. "I'm sure you heard Ricky was killed in prison. My family blamed me for it." Shelby didn't like the fact she felt a little bit sorry for her when she saw the obvious pain in Iris's eyes. "They hated me for testifying against him," Iris went on, "and they also hated me because I told them I was gay. I figured this was as far away as I could get from them and still be in the continental US. Trust me, I had no idea you were here. I'm sure you didn't ever want to see me again." "You're right about that." Shelby managed to squelch the sympathy she'd begun to feel. After all she had to do was remind herself of what Iris's brother had done. Thank you.
Thank you. PJ was a kind soul and a great creative person. We'll really miss her.
She was.
So, Kristen and Allison, would you read us a story?
Yeah, I'll do a little lead in and then Kristen's going to read a piece of the story for you.
All right, the rest of us will disappear.
Okay. So our book Wasteland is a dystopian story that follows two protagonists on opposite sides of the war in the former United States. They were raised to hate one another, but when Kate, who is military loyal, ends up being taken prisoner by Danny, who is on the side of the resistance, they start to realize that they are more alike than different. In the section that Kristen is about to read from Danny's point of view, the attraction between the two is becoming obvious and awkward due to them being enemies and Danny having strapped a bomb to Kate's ankle.
Thank you, Allisa. Okay. Light knocking on my door snaps me out of my frantic thoughts. With a sigh, I put the journal back in the safe and reach for the shotgun propped against the wall by the entrance. I look out the peephole. I frown. Not sure I'm ready for round two after exposing so much last night. Shotgun in hand, I unlock the door and swing it open. Sure enough, Kate is standing alone on my front porch, her hands in the air. "You've been avoiding me." Of course I have, not that I want to showcase that. I go for indifference and shrug. She glances at the gun. Her brow arches slightly. "Mind if I come in?" I look at her for a moment and wonder if that's such a good idea. My mind is a mess. Aside from trying to piece together our parents' enigmatic history, there's also the fact that I have 2 more days before we vote on her fate, and I don't have a clue about what we should do with her. Not to mention the nagging attraction and the fact that I still so very much want to kiss her. She utterly fascinates me. I get the feeling that letting her in my home again will blur a lot of lines, which is why, as she so clearly noticed, I have been avoiding her. Despite my better judgment, I step aside to let her in. I couldn't sleep. I had a lot on my mind. I grab the jug of water by my door and pour some into the empty bowl. I know how that is. I snag a clean towel from the other room and hand it to her after she washes up. What else brought her to my doorstep? "Why did you come here?" She regards me very carefully for a moment. "Simon's been stealing from everyone," she finally says. Her eyes widen. I wonder if she meant to say that. I chuckle and put my shotgun back against the wall. I know, I saw him swipe some bread on my way back from the infirmary this morning. And I saw him poking around in Rhiannon's garden a couple of days ago. She's pissed that someone took her corn. Kate nods, as if not at all surprised by my reaction. "He also wants to poison you and get that key around your neck." Her eyes fall to the chain leading under my shirt. I reveal the key dangling from the end of it. This? Why? She shrugs. To unlock the ankle bands and make a run for it. Her lack of regard for secrecy makes me want to laugh. Is she telling me this because she's already come up with a counter plan, or is she trying to play some sort of mind game with me? I carefully tuck the chain back in. This doesn't unlock the bands on your ankles. It unlocks my safe. The key to your freedom is with Jack. Kate looks at the safe on the far wall and then at me. She tips her head back and laughs. The sound twists something inside me. I knew it. Simon's an idiot. I clear my throat and look away. So how does he plan on poisoning me? Before I even finish my question, she's wandering through my house, scanning everything as if she's looking for something in particular. He wants me to get close to you, kind of like we are now. While she's turned away, I take the opportunity to study her. She has her uniform jacket back on for warmth, but she's still wearing one of my shirts. I like the way it looks on her. I don't think I'll ask for it back. Her hair is down, slightly wavy from the inconsistent weather. Her skin is sun-kissed from the days wandering in the wastelands with her soldiers. She also has on the fitted brown cargo pants I gave her the other day. The bottoms are tucked in her ankle-high black boots. On one of her legs, there's a slight bulge just above her boot line where the explosive is attached. I try to ignore the guilt of putting it there. She stops to study the old state map on the wall and doesn't elaborate any further on Simon's plan. Here to slip something into my tea, Turner? She shakes her head and chuckles. Hardly. She glances over her shoulder and catches me staring. Not my style. I lean against the door frame as she makes a slow circle in the main room. She runs her fingertips along the spines of the books. This is the second time she's been in my home and the second time she's been drawn to my books. You have quite the collection. I like books. As do I. She turns to explore again. Whenever she finds something that piques her interest, she cocks her head and examines it. Of course, I'm aware that she's making a bit of a show demonstrating how comfortable she is just waltzing through my home, but I'm somehow okay with it. I just left the infirmary. Ryan said your guy's been given the all clear. He's also heard from Allisa that you've been busying your guy at home every day while he was on bed rest. There's a hint of curiosity in her voice. His name is Jamie, and it's my fault he got stabbed. The least I can do is bring him food and keep him company. You know, you're nothing like I imagined. It said suddenly, as if she'd been holding it in for quite some time. You imagined me? I tease, amused and flattered. She rolls her eyes. Envisioned you, pictured you. I want to taunt her more, tell her how I envision her now, sitting alone somewhere daydreaming about me. But my curiosity about how she thought I looked outweighs my teasing. And how did you imagine me? Grotesque? She laughs when I frown. I fit your looks with your actions, monstrous and unattractive. Her laugh returns, only this time it's shy, nervous. Guess I was wrong about a lot of things. She turns away with a slight blush instead of elaborating further. She continues to look at the items in my house as if she didn't just lay one hell of a flirtatious line. It's clear to me that this attraction isn't one-sided. I briefly consider that kiss again and then just as quickly dismiss it. We're enemies. Enemies don't kiss.
That's a great words to live by. Enemies do not kiss. Don't even try.
I mean, maybe they do.
Maybe buy the book and find out if enemies do indeed kiss. So I'll just read next because, you know. So I don't stop my own video. So I'm going to read from her Consigliere, which is my June release. This is my first foray into the world of mobsters. We have two main characters. Siobhan Collins is the Consigliere. She's the Dawn to the Carlos Mancuso, who is heads an organized crime family in Dallas. And Royal Scott is an undercover FBI agent who has tasked with taking down the Mancuso family, beginning by infiltrating it and working for the family. This scene takes place a few chapters in, and Siobhan has ordered Royal to accompany her to a gala. So we'll just start there. Royal handed her keys to the valet at the museum and rolled her eyes at the way he looked down his nose in disdain. The Jeep was part of the persona she played, but she actually liked it and didn't give a shit what this guy or anyone else thought about it. Surprisingly, Siobhan seemed not to mind what was likely a big downgrade on her usual mode of transport, and the ride over it consisted of idle conversation about the museum and the type of event they were in for this evening. With the Jeep in the hands of the valet, Royal placed her hand on Siobhan's elbow and guided her through the throng of people entering the museum and past the line of press, hoping for a glimpse of someone famous entering the gala. Siobhan moved through the crowd, giving only slight nod to the reporters who called out her name. When they were inside, Royal took her coat and checked it along with hers. When she returned to Siobhan's side, she noticed she was holding 2 glasses of champagne. Royal took the one offered her way. Look at you. I was barely gone a moment. I suppose being a celebrity has its perks. Siobhan took a sip from her glass. No celebrity here. Only money, lots of it. Hardly any of it's mine. I'm merely a stand-in tonight. She motioned toward the door where the press waited for other notables to arrive. They'll take photos of everyone and sort out who's who later. When they do, I doubt I'll make the cut. Royal took note of the edge in her voice. It wasn't jealousy, more like sadness, but she couldn't quite place the emotion, so she pressed the point. They knew your name. She sighed. It's unique. Family name? It was my grandmother's. Ah, are you close? I never met her. I believe she's dead. Siobhan delivered the statement as matter-of-factly as if she were reading the ingredients on a box of crackers. Royal searched her face, but other than a brief flash of pain in her eyes, her expression was steel. She remembered from Siobhan's file at the bureau her mother had been estranged from the rest of her family, presumably because she'd had a child out of wedlock, but it was all supposition. She wanted to ask questions, but this wasn't the time. Instead, she reached for Siobhan's hand, but Siobhan dodged the gesture and resumed the conversation as if it hadn't taken a dark detour. I'm often at these events as the family's representative, she said, so the press is used to seeing me. That doesn't change the fact I'm not a Mancuso. They'd go nuts if Dominique or Celia showed up here. And they'd probably implode if Carlo arrived on the scene, Royal said, watching for Siobhan's reaction. He hates crowds, but he loves the art. She grinned. There was a time he would wear a hat and sunglasses and venture down here to visit the exhibits anonymously. He loves to see the installations. And while many people would be focused on who I saw tonight and gossip about the other donors, I'll be tasked with reporting exactly how the pieces were displayed. Sometimes I think he missed his calling as a curator. Royal smiled along with Siobhan, pleased she seemed to be comfortable sharing intimate details about Carlo. She wanted to ask questions, find out more, but she didn't want to burst this bubble by pressing too hard, so she steered the subject in a new direction. Do you enjoy the art, or are you merely here out of duty? Good question, Siobhan asked, gazing at the ceilings in the room, the walls in the room. Why don't you answer that for yourself when the evening is over? Royal nodded, intrigued by her assignment. A waiter approached them with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. Siobhan smiled at the waiter and listened carefully as he described the morsel, both the ingredients and how it was made, with a patience none of the other patrons displayed. When he was done talking, she took the bite, placed it in her mouth, and moaned her approval. These are amazing, she said. You must have one. Royal dutifully complied, unable to resist Siobhan's eagerness. The tang of the bite hit her tongue, and she moaned too. This is amazing, right? Siobhan took another and thanked the waiter, who moved on to the next group of guests. The food here is always spot on. Keep an eye out for the lobster wontons. They'll go fast. Royal grinned. What? Siobhan asked, the second bite midway to her mouth. I guess I'm just surprised to see the badass lawyer, counselor to the Don, brought to her knees with a tiny bit of an appetizer. Small things are often underrated, Siobhan said. Food is a simple pleasure, but it's a balm for the soul, as my mother used to say. I may deny myself many things, but a delicious bite is not one of them. Royal heard the hum of satisfaction in Siobhan's voice, but she couldn't tell if it was directed at her. She wanted it to be, though, and that was a problem. Time to refocus on the reason she was here in the first place. Besides delicious food, what else happens at these events? Well, these events consist of a lot of preening of the museum staff, several boring speeches, and a pressure campaign to give more money. I was hoping I'd get a private tour. I'm sure that can be arranged. I'm one of the speech makers, but after I'm done, I'll show you around. I look forward to it. And just like that, they were back to flirting, and Royal surrendered to it. She needed to make headway on this case so she could be done with it. And if flirting with a beautiful, accomplished, and complicated woman was the way to get there, she was all in. She placed her hand on Siobhan's arm, pleased to see she didn't shrug away. Shall we go find another drink? Siobhan laced her fingers through Royal's. Absolutely. They'd barely reached the bar when a man at the front of the room tapped his finger on the microphone and called her name. "Looks like you're on," Royal said. Siobhan barely hid a slight grimace. "Looks like, wait for me?" "Of course. Don't think I've forgotten about my private tour. Go be the face of the Mancuso family, but when you're done, I'm claiming you for the rest of the night." She watched Siobhan's face for reaction to see if the bold statement was well received, and was greeted with a broad smile. "Claiming, you say? Interesting." Siobhan released her hand slowly, like she was contemplating choosing to stay instead of giving her speech. When their grasp split, she leaned close to Royal's ear. "We'll see who'll be claiming who. Just you wait." She turned and walked away before Royal could react. Damn, it was getting hard to focus. Siobhan was almost to the stage when Royal felt a phone buzz in her pocket. It was her official phone. She'd been issued for this case, and the only person who had the number was her boss and Siobhan. She pulled it out with a sense of dread to see her boss's private number on the screen. In all the time she'd been working undercover, he'd never called her burner phone, choosing some other, less obvious way to reach out. He'd only call if it was an emergency, but if she were to duck out now, it would definitely be noticed. The phone continued to buzz as the MC urged everyone to turn their attention to Siobhan. She considered turning it off, but her instincts told her to answer. She glanced to the left, spotted an alcove. She edged her way to the throng of people, but by the time she was secluded in the semi-private space, the phone had stopped ringing. She started to push redial, but the incoming text paralyzed her. The words were simple and terrifying. "Bomb threat. Get out now." Okay. All right. Hello. Welcome back. Okay, so that was her consigliere. The links in the chat roll, as are the links to all of these books being put in the chat roll there. Go order them now and receive many blessings. And now I'd like to call on Casey Richardson to tell us a story.
Okay, thank you, Carsen. So I'll be reading from my July release, Seasons for Change. It's a story about Morgan escaping to Lake Tahoe for self-discovery. After finding her girlfriend cheating on her, she rents a cabin up the street from Sean, and they quickly become friends. This scene that I'm reading, Sean plans a day to show Morgan everything Lake Tahoe has to offer. First up is watching the sunrise. Morgan and Sean pulled into the parking lot of Emerald Bay State Park. The sky was starting to turn from pitch dark to a dark purple. The ridge of mountains east of the lake were rimmed in an orange-yellow hue that promised a spectacular daybreak. This is the best place to watch the sunrise. It's not too busy now, but in about 15 minutes, the parking lot will be packed, so we better hurry. Where are we going? You'll see. Sean grabbed a blanket and thermos of coffee and led the way for the best view. Sean navigated, climbing the large boulders with ease. Morgan, not so much. Hey, a little help here? Sean turned around and sheepishly smiled. Sorry, hang on. Let me put our stuff down and I'll come back and help. Sean returned and guided Morgan around the large boulder and followed a dirt path to reach their destination. The backside of the rock had nooks that could be used as steps. Seriously, Sean, we couldn't have taken this way to begin with? Sean shrugged. Yeah, but this way isn't as fun as climbing rocks. Sean looked like a child who was scolded for not cleaning up after herself. How did you do that with your hands full? Sean spread out the blanket for them to sit on and then held on to Morgan's hand as she helped her sit. Lots of practice, I guess. I've been doing it since I was a kid. I'd go explore the woods when I came to visit my grandparents, which included climbing a lot of rocks. Your childhood sounds like it was a lot of fun coming up here. It was. Here, let me pour you a cup of coffee. Sean pulled 2 paper cups out of her small backpack, and she poured each of them a cup of the strong, hot liquid. Morgan took her first sip of coffee for the morning, and she sighed once it warmed her throat. The sky continued to slowly lighten, the stars and moon faded, and Morgan shivered as a slight breeze of cold air tickled her face. Cold? A little, not too bad. Sean took Morgan's cup and placed it next to hers. Here, sit in front of me. Sean spread her legs and Morgan hesitated. Sweet Jesus. Sean was slowly killing her, yet her pulse quickened despite being at death's door. What Morgan wouldn't give to feel the sensation of being between Sean's legs, and she was offering. She crawled closer, then scooted back until her behind was nestled into Sean's center. While she'd been repositioning herself, Sean pulled something out of her backpack and opened it. What's that? Sean placed it in front of Morgan and wrapped it around her. It's a safety blanket. It'll keep you warm. Morgan turned her head to look back at Sean. What will you use to keep yourself warm? Sean smirked. You. Sean wrapped her arms around Morgan. Is this okay? Morgan nodded, not trusting her voice. She was sure it would be high and shaky, giving away more of Sean's effect on her. Morgan took a deep breath, the cold air nearly burning her lungs, but her insides were on fire. There she was, sitting between Sean's legs with her arms loosely around Morgan's waist, waiting to watch the sunrise in one of the most beautiful places Morgan had ever seen. She felt like she was the lead in a rom-com film or the protagonist in a romance novel. So where was your last vacation? Morgan chuckled and leaned her head back on Sean's broad shoulder. Here, actually, the first time I met you, although the trip was cut short because there was a work emergency. That's when I discovered Jess was cheating on me. Morgan felt Sean's arms tighten around her, and she placed a kiss to Morgan's temple. I can't believe she did that. If you were my girlfriend, I'd never look at another woman. Morgan stayed quiet as she took to heart what Sean said. For some reason, Morgan wanted to believe her. But as much as she felt like she'd been healing, the thought of Jess cheating on her still tore at her heart. She was still cautious of her well-being and her still fragile heart. She wasn't interested in being with someone who was a player or couldn't keep it in their pants when a pretty face came along. She wanted to love and be loved by a woman who would be faithful to her. She needed to try and trust again. I'm a believer in things happen for a reason. If I hadn't gone down the rabbit hole after the breakup, I wouldn't be here with you at this very moment. And this is exactly where I want to be right now. I really like that we've become friends. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else either right now. I mean, check out the sunrise. Morgan looked straight ahead and could see the top of the sun break the peak of the mountain. She'd heard some of their fellow sunrise watchers' commentary, but honestly, no words could do it justice. Morgan watched as the sun slowly rose, bringing more yellow than orange to meet the purple sky. She wasn't sure why, but she felt this was a turning point in her life. A peaceful sensation came over her, like she could see the colors more clearly. She was able to breathe easier, and she felt like she'd come home. The feel of Sean's arms around her, Sean's chin resting on Morgan's right shoulder as they watched the sunrise, had Morgan feeling things she'd never felt before. She'd loved and lost a few women in her life, women who she felt could have been long-term, but she'd never felt this strongly for any woman as she felt for Sean in that moment. She didn't know if it was a fleeting moment, one captured in the beauty and stillness of the sun rising over the mountains, but Morgan felt like she needed to explore her feelings for Sean. Morgan reached behind her and grabbed Sean's head as she turned her own. Kiss me, Sean. Sean turned a little more and slowly approached Morgan's lips with her own. She didn't question Morgan. She didn't say a word. She just did what Morgan commanded of her, and Morgan thought that was very sexy. The anticipation alone had Morgan worked up. When their lips finally met, Morgan felt the explosion of the sun behind the ridge light up behind her eyelids. She opened her mouth slightly to allow Sean's tongue to slowly enter and touch her own tongue. Morgan sighed her pleasure, yet regretted the time and location. There were people around them, preventing Morgan from fully exploring Sean's mouth. She slowly ended the kiss, but kept her eyes closed. She felt Sean's forehead meet her own, and Sean's ragged breath tickle her skin. That was some kiss. Morgan's laugh was shaky. Despite her wanting to take it slow, Sean's attention, her chivalry, her kiss was confusing Morgan. Right now, she wanted all of Sean. Future heartache be damned. It sure was, and I want to do a lot more than kissing, but I'm really looking forward to you showing me more of your Tahoe. Let's go then.
Excellent.
Okay.
That was awesome. My favorite
my
line
God.
was, she thought she was a protagonist in a romance novel. She was.
She is.
Okay, VK, round us out here. Tell us a story.
All right, thank you. I'm going to read from my June release, which is called When in Doubt. It's a romantic intrigue. And this is the second encounter between my two main characters, Jerry Wilder, who is a police officer, and Simone Sullivan, a psychologist. They've met at a coffee shop to get to know each other a little better just before Jerry answers a call that forces her to face two issues that she dislikes equally: police corruption and therapy. Jerry secured a small table in the back of Green Bean with a clear view of both exits for safety purposes, she told herself, but really, she wanted to watch Simone Sullivan walk across the room toward her. She focused on the front door again as it opened. Simone glanced around, made eye contact, and stopped briefly with her hand over her stomach before moving slowly toward Jerry. She wore leggings and a V-neck sweater that accented her curves and graceful movements. Jerry's mouth dried, and the closer Simone got, the quicker her pulse thrummed. Is this seat taken, officer? Yes. I mean, no, it's yours. Jerry rose and pulled out the chair beside hers. Please. Simone casually touched Jerry's hand as they settled, and heat surged up her arm. She wasn't accustomed to casual contact feeling so intimate. I'm glad you texted. I thought you'd forgotten me. Simone grinned. Is that even possible? Jerry pressed her lips together. Where had that come from? She'd thought it, believed it, but it wasn't something she'd normally say while trying to be cool on a first date. Simone's smile widened and the pupils of her green eyes dilated. Sorry. Jerry reached for some money to take her focus away from the way Simone stared at her like she was something to eat. What can I get you? Decaf latte. If I drink the hard stuff this late, I won't sleep all night. Be right back. She placed their orders and waited at the counter, taking the opportunity to observe Simone. She extended her legs under the table and raised her arms over her head in a deep stretch. Her breast strained against the fabric of her sweater. Twisting sideways, she sighed heavily. Her movements were easy, almost sensuous, and Jerry moaned. She paid the barista and slowly walked back to the table, controlling her breathing and the direction of her gaze. She wanted to imprint Simone's classic features in her mind, just in case this was her only chance. Here you go. She set the coffee in front of Simone and took her seat. Back problems? Aren't you observant? Occupational necessity. Simone clicked her mug against Jerry's. I was a gymnast in my early days and still have the aches and pains to prove it. A low center of gravity is a plus for the sport. Jerry envisioned Simone performing her routines with style and the kind of focus that etched worry lines between her eyes. I was a basketball and volleyball girl. Height is a must. And you wear it well, Officer Wilder. Simone wiggled her eyebrows and Jerry lost concentration. She read people every day, homing in on nonverbal cues. Simone registered as sincere, trustworthy, rare, especially in Jerry's line of work. Are you flirting with me, Miss Sullivan? Depends. Would it bother you? Not at all. But before we progress to the public table dancing part of the program, tell me about yourself. You have family here? Parents who are diplomats and travel most of the year, and an older brother and his wife. You? Just me. It's a long story I'd like to tell you, but it'll take more than a few minutes squeezed between calls. Did she really just say she'd like to tell Simone her story? Short version, I sort of recreated myself and became a cop because I believe in the work. Sounds like an intriguing story. And based on what I've seen, you're very good at your job. Simone gave Jerry's hand a squeeze and then lifted her coffee mug to her lips, her perfectly shaped lips. Jerry squirmed. So what do you do when you're not flirting with police officers? Simone laughed and the sound of it rolled through Jerry. Guess. Jerry leaned back in the chair and studied her. The longer she stared, the redder Simone's face turned. I'm not sure I'm up for such close scrutiny. Well, you should be, because I'm guessing you're a professor of something. Why professor? Simone cocked her head to one side. Impressionable college students salivating at your voice and the sexy way you lick your lips when you talk. Simone's face reddened again. Too much? Just unexpected. Are you flirting with me now? Officer Wilder. Totally. So am I right? Opted out of academia. Too restrictive, and as you pointed out, too many forbidden temptations. Wise choice. Jerry drummed her fingers on the table and thought of other options. Medical doctor, journalist, social worker. Nope, nope, and nope. Okay, I give up. A loud beep interrupted their conversation. Cars 1113 and 1114 respond to drug activity. Abandoned building at 612 Moorhead Avenue. Jerry jumped from her seat. I'm sorry. I'd hoped for more time, but thanks for meeting me. I really enjoyed it. She pushed her chair in and started to walk away, but Simone caught her hand. Can I see you again? I'd like that. I need to explain my situation. Be in touch. Jerry brushed the back of Simone's hand with her thumb and hurried to her car. A woman like Simone Sullivan didn't come along often. Maybe that was why she was so excited and terrified about seeing her again.
Most excellent.
Thank you. Thank
They
you.
must meet again for table dancing.
They must.
So just a reminder to the audience, and I see some people have already sent us some questions, but you can ask us anything at all, anything. And just put it in the Q&A box. I know, whatever.
Yeah.
But we refuse
Saturday.
the right to not answer.
All right, so just this one's for Allison and Kristen. When does the next Badlands book come out? The cliffhanger ending is killing me.
I love cliffhangers. So sorry. Allisa, July 2022.
Yep. July 2022. So you gotta wait. Sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, it'll be great. It'll be fantastic. So this question is from Joni. Where do you get inspiration from your stories? Do you start with interesting characters, or do strange plots come to you first? Casey?
Actually, settings come to me first, and then the characters, and then I have to go from there, find out what they do and what their story is.
So do you set your books all over the place, or just, like, I want to set a book in interesting place?
Yeah, I mean, well, I grew up in Lake Tahoe, so which is where this book is set, and I mean, I'm probably biased, but I think it's the most beautiful place on earth. So I figure, what better place to write a book? So set a story. So yeah, it's the more books I write, the more I go with the setting first. Just, where do I want this to be?
So I'm going to segue to you, VK, with that question, because prior to the pandemic, you traveled quite extensively. And so I bet that's true for you too, about settings.
It is. It really is. Yes, too bad no travel this past year, but that's how it goes. Yeah, I like to choose different settings. I've done a book set in Africa and one partially set in Australia. And I just like the challenge of learning about a new place and trying to find something interesting that would segue into a book that people would read and enjoy that didn't sound like a travelogue.
That's the hard part, right? Because you want to
That's the hard
all
part.
that good stuff.
Yes.
Okay, so Kristen and Allison, how about you guys? How did you start? I mean, where did the genesis of your story start?
I would say it was plot. I think that started the story. And then we developed characters, and then the setting we decided, I think, a little more so. Kristen might disagree.
Combination of all three at the same time.
Yeah.
A perfect storm.
So because you write together, so how does that work if you disagree? You arm wrestle?
Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. No, we usually, we don't disagree often, but I think whenever we do, we both kind of present our cases, and then one of us usually comes around. So
Sometimes Kristen predicts I'm going to disagree and tries to present her case in like 25 messages before I've even said anything.
I'm a pessimist. What can I say?
You're prepared. Is
That's
what you
right.
are.
That's right. I'm prepared.
So I'll answer that question since I'm here too. It varies. Like sometimes it's the setting, sometimes it's the characters, and sometimes it's the plot. It just kind of varies. And so I think my 29th book comes out in October, and I'd say there's a good variety of all of those represented. So Joni asked a follow-up question. This is just a speed round question. Boxers or briefs, Casey?
Did I answer that too quickly?
Yeah. I didn't even hear you. What did you say?
Boxers.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Are we all answering?
BK?
My answer depends on who they're on.
Yeah, there you go.
Or what's clean?
That's true.
I like that answer.
I like that answer too. I'm going to go with both.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm by underwear. Anyway.
Oh.
Okay. All right. Somebody wanted to know what everyone is working on now, and Allison and Kristen, I hope you're working on a sequel.
The sequel's done. We just have to send it to Miss Barbara Ann Wright for editing. And then there's a third book. So there's 3 in the series.
Excellent. And so what are you going to do after that?
I have no idea.
Nap.
We have kids. We can't nap. Come on.
No, seriously, will you write more together after the series? Have you even talked about it?
I'm
putting you on the spot, totally.
I've actually asked her what she wants to work on next. I think we might try doing something on our own, but I wouldn't say we would neuld write together again. I'd love to write with her again.
You heard it here. It's on camera being taped.
That was a very nice answer.
I love you.
Casey, how about you? What are you working on now?
Another romance, but it's going to be a little bit of a tearjerker. So a lot of emotions going to be involved in this one. So the last emotional book I wrote was Courageous Love, and so I took a break for a few more books, and now it's ready to get back to making people cry.
I don't even know what to say. That's
There's always tears with romance, though, right?
There's no crying in romance.
Right. That's baseball.
I'm not real sporty. How about you, BK? What are you working on now?
This is called, there it is,
Oh,
Deadly Secrets. It's another romantic intrigue, which will be out in February. It involves a retired Army major who is a bodyguard for a corporate whistleblower.
Ooh.
Excellent. My book coming out in October is called Trial by Fire.
I mean, after 29, how can you remember all the titles?
And it's the first book. It's not really a series. It's a set of books set in the same world, all in a courthouse setting. It's called the Courting Danger Romances. And it's about an arson trial and a prosecutor and a defense attorney who are working on that trial. And then I'm going to write 3 of those. And in between them, I'm working on another book set in the same world as her consigliere, and then working on a standalone right now. So that'll be out in February. And that's me. So any other questions? We've got another question. Have you ever used a real life story and twisted it to make it your own? And that's a great question. Kristen Allison.
I haven't.
Mm-mm.
No,
Okay,
we like to world build. So
Well, I'll go more meta then. Did you include any real life stuff in your world building?
kind of. We started this a while ago, but the world takes place in Wasteland, in the future after, another war, and climate change and, and we're on the path.
What's happening now?
I feel like we're kind of on the path to that, which is kind of like, ooh. So.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah.
Casey, how about you?
I have true stories within this story. So the story itself is fiction, but a lot of things that I've experienced or conversations that I've had end up in a book somehow.
Sure. Absolutely. BK?
Yes, I especially like to take folks that weren't very nice to me in my former career and make them bad guys and make them pay.
Give them the alley to put in a meat grinder.
Exactly.
A meat grinder would be helpful. Yes, a lot of the stuff that I write, the suspense part, some of the ideas have come from things that actually happened during my career, and so it comes in handy that way.
Same for those of you who haven't heard me say it 1,000 times. I used to be a criminal defense attorney, and same, lots to draw from there. And definitely, one book that was very real was Nothing But the Truth. I think it was my 4th book. And that's based on just the most bizarrest thing that ever happened to me, but as an attorney. So I can't tell you what it is, or, we'll spoil the story.
Tease.
I know. So we just have another minute. We already talked about what we were working on. So let's see if we've got another question here. No boxers or briefs. So what are you reading now, if you read? How's that? That's a fun question.
I'm reading Dune.
Oh, excellent. Excellent.
I want to read it before the movie comes out, and I'm like, oh, this thing's like 600 and some pages. Am I gonna make it? But I did just finish Georgia Beers' new book.
Shaken or
Yes. Excellent book.
I'm reading one of Georgia Beers' book as well, but it's Flavor of the Month.
Oh yeah.
I'm almost done with it.
Isn't that the pie book? Is that about pies? Yes.
Yes. I have to stop reading it. I get so hungry, and I'm almost like getting out of bed to go to the kitchen sometimes, and so I just put it down.
I adore pie. But I made so much pie during that book.
There's so much detail about like the taste of food and cinnamon rolls and pie, and I'm like, I have to stop reading. I'm gonna get out of bed and eat.
Totally. VK, what are you reading?
I'm reading Finding Freedom by Harry and Meghan.
Excellent. Excellent.
I tend to read real, like
Mm-hmm.
nonfiction stuff when I'm not writing. It just gives me a break from, the thought of trying to think up ideas or, yeah.
Well,
Most
and that kind of stuff can be really inspiring too.
Yes,
So,
it can. You're right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
how about you, Casey? What are you reading?
I'm reading Before, After, and Always. Before, After, Always by Morgan Lee Miller. Really good book. I love her writing. She's so good. She's so good.
So I'm reading, I'm actually reading George's book too, Shaken or Stirred, and it says Shaken and Stirred or Shaken and Stirred. I've got it right over here.
Sure.
Or it's or.
It's good.
Because I love reading about mixology and drinks, and I think
It'll make you want one.
exactly. So I might be making them while I'm reading, but I would like to
Or
thank
writing.
exactly. What is it? Right drunk, get it sober.
Right, John Devitt over. Yeah.
I'd like to thank all of you, Allisa, Kristen, Casey, VK, for joining us today. Thanks to all of you wonderful readers who tuned in to hear us read, and we love you all. Go buy our books and tune in next for Heat Factor, moderated by the Queen of Heat, Megan O'Brien, featuring D. Jackson Lee, Renee Roman, Britt Ryder, and MJ Williams. Thanks for attending the Bookathon this weekend. Y'all have a wonderful weekend.
Very good. Thanks, Carsen.
Thank you.